Hello everyone. This is chapter 17 from my contemporary romance novel Under a Namibian Sky. A calm tranquility had settled over the lodge. Most of the guests were away on a walking safari or out with one of the desert guides. Some were sitting quietly, talking, or reading in the shade of the lapa or their rooms. A few sun lovers were lying on sun lounges or swimming serious laps in the pool for this time of the day. Naomi was helping Kerry. The dining room was to be the setting for her meeting about the dune buggies with Luca and Santina. But to maximise their time, it was also the last lunch before the Italians had to leave in the afternoon. The staff had dragged 4 tables together to form a larger one and set the table for lunch. Auntie Elsa had arranged for a special last meal for her favourite guests and was fussing in the kitchen, no doubt to the annoyance of Chef. Kerry and Naomi had prepared bound documents for each of the 5 participants and small notebooks and pens for everyone. A large whiteboard stood at one end of the table. Marker pens lay nearby. Kerry rechecked her watch. "Are we ready? Did I forget anything? They know to come here, don't they? Where are they anyway?" Naomi looked at the oversized clock on the wall. Its chimes were imminent as the minute hand slowly climbed to join the hour hand at 1 o'clock. "I'm sure they'll be here any minute now. Don't worry. You've already sold it to them. This is just logistics, and you're good at that." Naomi went to stand beside Kerry. She put her arm around her friend and gave Kerry an encouraging squeeze. "Just remember to breathe. You'll be fine." Kerry absent-mindedly patted Naomi's hand on her shoulder. "Thanks, hon. I'm so grateful you're doing this with me. It's my big chance, you know." The big brown eyes she turned on Naomi held a mixture of doubt, fire and hope. Naomi nodded and smiled at her friend. "And I'll be right beside you. You'll do just great. I believe in you." As the clock chimed, Auntie Elsa led her guests into the dining room. Luca smiled at Naomi as he walked toward the table. Her heart fluttered. She returned what she hoped was a professional smile. Kerry immediately stepped forward. An uncharacteristically shy grin played around her mouth. Her eyes travelled over everyone. "Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Would you like to take your seats?" Kerry pulled out a chair and indicated for Santina to sit facing the window. Santina's smile, directed at Kerry, betrayed her excitement. "This all looks wonderful. Thank you, Kerry." Naomi thought it brilliant of Kerry to seat Luca at the top of the table. This way, he was sitting directly opposite Kerry. It was the perfect place for him to be when Kerry delivered her presentation. Naomi also realized it was Kerry's way of acknowledging that Luca was leading the project. Kerry might be full of madcap ideas, but when it came down to it, she was creative and flexible, yet single-minded. Her meticulous attention to detail and her formidable powers of organization complemented her outgoing personality that drew people to her upon meeting her. She made people feel safe, and as though she could handle any challenge. Naomi didn't doubt Kerry would make a formidable manager for Desert Lodge. No matter what else went on in her life, Kerry had the unenviable ability to focus intensely on something when it most needed. It was a gift, not only for Kerry, but also for Desert Lodge. Naomi always thought they were lucky to have Kerry working with them. Now Auntie Elsa would have the perfect opportunity to see for herself what an ideal manager Kerry would be for Desert Lodge. Surely promoting Kerry could only be in their best interests. Naomi sat down and crossed her fingers for her friend under the table. Kerry waited until everyone had taken their seat before walking over to the whiteboard. "Shall we begin?" She took their silent nods as consent and rang a bell. Moments later, waiters appeared with food and drinks. While the waiters served lunch, Kerry wrote some figures on the whiteboard. Satisfied that everyone had what they wanted for lunch, Kerry continued. I know you're leaving this afternoon, Luca and Santina, so I'll keep this as brief as I can. Naomi knew her friend well and could see how nervous Kerry was, but she also knew that no one else would see it. Kerry was a masterful communicator and used that talent alongside her discipline to run the administrative and housekeeping departments at Lodge most efficiently. Naomi smiled and winked encouragingly at Kerry. It seemed to have the desired effect. Kerry relaxed, and her brilliant smile returned. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'm more than happy to run the logistics on this side. Kerry looked to see if Auntie Elsa was in agreement before she continued. But since Naomi is our head desert guide, and she knows the desert like the back of her hand, I feel she should be our liaison with you in Italy. Naomi could tell you much more about the desert conditions and what would be required physically from the buggies than I could. Would that work? Again, Kerry glanced around the room for agreement from the others. Luca looked pleased and nodded emphatically as he lifted a forkful of rice to his mouth. Since there weren't any objections, Kerry continued. Naomi tuned out Kerry's voice. She wasn't sure how to feel about liaising with Luca directly. Would contact with him not sustain and prolong the pain in her heart? But who else could do it if not her? What about Gerard? Maybe she should have a word with him. The sounds of Kerry's and Luca's voices penetrated her awareness as they discussed some finer points of their agreement. No, she must stop thinking of her own feelings. Her friend needed her. Auntie Elsa needed her. Desert Lodge needed her, needed this deal. She could be professional about this, couldn't she? These people, this place, meant so much to her. Surely it would be a sacrifice worth making. The lunch was over. Naomi sighed. How could an hour and a half fly by so soon? The inevitability of their upcoming parting seemed to weigh heavily on them all. Luca and Santina had both become important to Desert Lodge, even before the buggy deal. But now Naomi sensed their fates were sealed. She found it difficult to tear her eyes away from Luca as he talked with Kerry and Auntie Elsa. Although he seemed excited about the deal, a shadow had crept into his energy. It was the same shadow she'd felt in her body, the shadow that parting with loved ones always produced. But in Luca's case, maybe she only imagined it. She needed him to feel what she was feeling. Or did she? With a smile and a wave at her, Luca took long strides from the room on his way to check the jet for their return journey to Windhoek. Auntie Elsa left with Santina, ostensibly to help finish her packing, but clearly the two friends just wanted to spend some more time together. Alone, Kerry and Naomi looked at each other. The dining room was suddenly quiet. Both sighed simultaneously, then laughed. Kerry flopped down on the nearest chair. Wow, that was hairy, but I did okay, didn't I? We got the deal. Naomi went to stand behind Kerry and put her arms around her friend, nuzzling her cheek against Kerry's. You did more than okay. I knew you'd do it, though. Congrats. We must celebrate later. She let go of Kerry and went to sit opposite her instead. Kerry leaned forward, her eyes glittering even more than before. That's a great idea. I'll get some champagne to the Lapa before Luca and Santina leave. Naomi held up her hand. Not so fast. Luca will be flying. He can't have any alcohol. You need to give him a soft drink or some mineral water. But yes, that would be lovely. A toast to our buggy future. Yes, and a toast to our future with our Marty. Hopefully now Auntie Elsa will be open to offering me the job as manager, don't you think? Naomi knew Kerry was impatient to speak with Auntie Elsa. I'm sure, but just wait a day or two. Don't rush in there. You know she doesn't like change. And this would be a biggie for her. Even though we've never officially had a manager before, she was always kind of the manager, so she'd have to get used to the idea that someone else will do her job. And because she's preoccupied with Santina leaving at the moment, I'd wait for a few days if I were you. Kerry seemed to be turning Naomi's words over in her mind, but she couldn't contain her excitement about the possibility of her dream coming true. Unable to sit still any longer, she got up. Her smile lit up the room as she regarded her friend. You're right. I'll wait, and I'll make my proposal even better, so when I have my meeting with Auntie Elsa, she'll welcome the changes I'll propose. Thanks, Naomi, hun. You're so wise. Kerry glanced around the room, at the whiteboard, the table with the remnants of their lunch, and crumpled pieces of paper here and there. Well, let's get this all cleared up. We can't allow anyone else to see our deals and figures. The staff can clear the lunch things later. Kerry picked up the discarded pieces of paper while Naomi went to wipe their secrets from the whiteboard. Naomi was aware that everything suddenly felt surreal. That Luca had been here at all was beginning to feel like a dream. He was the man of her dreams. As she was wiping the board, her eyes fell on the word Armati that Kerry had encircled. Their deal with Armati sounded so far-fetched to her rational mind. She spoke without turning around, knowing Kerry was somewhere behind her, and they were still alone in the room. I must say, I'm astonished that no one else had ever approached Armati with a dune buggy idea like this. I was just thinking about the Middle East and all those oil princes with their Armatis. They live near a desert. I'm sure they have dune races there, right? Kerry's voice came muffled as she was collecting more crumpled pieces of paper from under the table. Yes, I've been thinking about that. I wonder why no one else has ever approached them. Or maybe they had, but had been turned down. Perhaps Luca has only accepted our deal because of you. Oh, I don't believe that's true. No, this is purely a business deal. It has nothing to do with me. Why would you even say that? Yes, we spent some time together, but only because Auntie Elsa appointed me to look after him and Santina. I can't deny we got on well, but Luca is a businessman, and I'm sure for him, business is business. He's the Armati prince and heir apparent, after all. Did I tell you, people surrounded us to gawk at the Armati the night we went for dinner in Windhoek. I'm sure he's surrounded by gorgeous women wherever he goes. With his lifestyle and money, he can give them anything they want. Naomi turned around at the sounds of Kerry banging her head on the table as she got up and cursed. Are you... Oh, Luca. Luca was standing in the doorway. But he may as well have been standing on another planet. He seemed so distant. The look on his face was unreadable and serious. Naomi realized he might have overheard her, and how wrong her words may have sounded to him. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. His eyes peered Naomi's. I was going to ask you something, but since your duties regarding Santina and me are nearly at an end... Kerry, sensing the change in atmosphere, and eager that her friend's happiness and the success of their project not to be jeopardized, tried to come to the rescue. Luca, I'm sure Naomi didn't mean to upset you. Yes, Auntie Elsa appointed her to look after you and Santina, but you must surely know by now that you two have become friends, if nothing else. Luca contemplated Kerry for a moment, before his eyes returned to Naomi. I thought we were at least friends. See. Naomi quickly walked towards him. We are, Luca. But Luca had heard what he'd heard. Naomi's words had been like a punch to his stomach. He couldn't believe that he'd been so wrong about her. In his mind's eye, he experienced all the wonderful times again with her, swimming, sunrise and sunset safaris, finding and rescuing the Ellie, laughing, flirting, the easiness of being with her, her willingness to put up with his most outrageous requests, like the foot massage, her soft femininity, and how eagerly she'd responded to his kisses. He felt as though he'd found his soulmate in Naomi. Here was this beautiful, unspoilt, kind, strong woman, his perfect match. How could he have been so wrong about her? Was it all in the line of duty for her? And those words, with his lifestyle and money? How often had he heard those words? How often had those words led to rejection, pain and loneliness? And here they were again. Just when he'd thought he'd conquered his demons, when he'd finally been brave enough to open his heart. But now, it felt as though an ice-cold hand had seized his heart and was squeezing it tighter and tighter. He had to get out. He had to get some air. Luca waved a hand, dismissing anything else Naomi might say, and turned to leave. Kerry immediately went to him, taking his arm. Trying to douse the flames of the lurking friction, Kerry spoke with forced excitement, telling him about the small celebratory drinks in the lapa. As he followed Kerry from the room, his eyes flitted in Naomi's direction, but there was no warmth in them. The small drinks party felt tense rather than congratulatory. Naomi stood with Auntie Elsa and Santina. She was only half listening to them, but their enthusiastic voices penetrated her brain. She knew they were talking about their upcoming birthday celebrations, but her mind was on Luca. He stood off to the side with Kerry, and Stefan at his side, who had gate-crashed the party when he saw the champagne. Luca's body seemed stiff as he stared off into the distance, while Kerry and Stefan continued talking to him and to each other. Naomi couldn't understand it. He felt like a stranger. This Luca wasn't the man who'd held her in his arms, who'd kissed her, who'd laughed and flirted with her. But maybe this was the real Luca. Maybe he was reverting to his usual self now that his vacation was finished. No wonder Santina had had to force him to have a break. The sudden change in him made no sense. So, okay, he'd overheard her speaking with Kerry, but she couldn't understand what she could have said that had this impact on him. The reassuring sounds of the other guests around them pulled Naomi back to reality. But she couldn't look away from Luca, even though he pretended to be unaware of her presence. She saw him glancing at his watch, and with a small, tight smile at Kerry and Stefan, excused himself as he walked over to Santina. He put a hand on Santina's back, alerting her it was time for them to leave. Santina and Auntie Elsa led the way around the building to the jet, walking arm in arm, talking and patting each other's hands on their arms. Naomi followed, dawdling, not wanting to be there. She was aware that Luca, Stefan and Kerry were behind her. She could hear snippets of their conversation here and there. It was just small talk, mostly from Kerry and Stefan. Luca remained uncharacteristically quiet. As they neared the jet, parked on the runway ready for takeoff, Ota Jan and the other members of the anti-poacher unit arrived to say goodbye to Luca. He seemed touched by their gesture, and for a few moments he was once again the Luca Naomi knew. He spent time with each of the guards, shaking their hands and hugging them. Ota Jan seemed almost tearful as he gave Luca a final hug and an elongated African handshake. Then Luca came over to Auntie Elsa and Santina. He kissed Auntie Elsa on both cheeks before turning to Kerry to do the same. He shook Stefan's hand, almost formally, wishing him a good vacation at Desert Lodge. But when he came to Naomi, she saw him becoming the distant stranger again. A quick, cold peck on each of her cheeks, and avoiding looking into her eyes, was her parting memory of Luca. It was such a different memory than the one she'd held on his arrival at Desert Lodge. As she stood with the others, waving at the jet and its occupants, she felt she could sympathize with the tears of the waitresses who'd been flung aside by some prince after their vacation here. But Naomi never imagined it would happen to her. Strangely, she was grateful for Luca's sudden, unexplained coldness. It made it easier for her to say goodbye to him. If he'd been the Luca she'd come to know and love, it would have been absolute torture. Naomi felt numb as she turned to follow Stefan, Carrie and Auntie Elsa back to the house. Auntie Elsa was sniffling into a tissue and wiping tears from her eyes. Carrie had a comforting arm around her, Carrie's taller size resulting in hugging Auntie Elsa to her. Stefan, buoyed by the alcohol in his system, was ready to party more. His alcohol-fueled breath brushed over Naomi as he tried to get her to join him. Thank you very much for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you so much for liking and sharing my videos, and most of all, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. It makes it possible for me to, put more videos like this on my channel and to grow it, and for YouTube to know that I'm around. So thank you very much. Until next time.